Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Arabian Travel Market 2022. I'm delighted to be with you today. My name is Eleni Jakos. I am an anchor and correspondent for CNN. I was just hearing some people talking about how exciting it is to be back here at the ATM, to be together, to look forward, and knowing that we've overcome some of the greatest challenges facing humanity. The last few years have absolutely tested the resilience and agility of the travel and tourism industry. It's been unprecedented, the shocks have been unprecedented, but we've come out of it absolutely stronger. Reflecting on what the industry means, at least to me and so many other people that I speak to, it basically defines us in so many ways today, of development, of globalization, of bringing people together. It's significant to global growth, to jobs, and importantly, it's a strong revenue earner. We experienced what it was like to be apart, to not engage in person, to not visit our favorite destinations, our families, or our business partners. In the ATM's 29-year history, this year we get together in person for the second time since the start of the pandemic, with 1,500 exhibitors, 112 representatives from global destinations, and 20,000 visitors. And we gather stronger. And we've been tested in terms of what it means to overcome some of these great shocks. Now, this year we know brings recovery, and this has been the prognosis, right, from the developmental agencies at least. But we've seen more risks that could possibly unravel or even derail the path that we're on. Our new reality is one of losing perhaps significant markets due to geopolitics, inflation, higher oil prices. This is all going to be top of mind for so many of the business leaders and for our travelers out there. So in the light of risk aversion or potential uncertainty, how do we draw on some of those lessons that we learned during the pandemic to ensure that we remain on the path of recovery and come out even stronger? We have an incredible appetite to get back to normal and to travel again. This year's theme is about looking ahead. We're going to be focusing on future trends and opportunities while navigating challenges in transportation, tourism, hospitality, events, attraction, and a whole lot more. Ladies and gentlemen, this sector has such an enormous multiplier effect. It compounds so much of what we do, from the person selling coffee outside of a busy conference area like this one, to a mom and pop, bed and breakfast somewhere in a remote, exciting part of the world. It is important that we try and remain on the path that we are right now. The virtual event of the ATM will be taking place next week, and we will be able to have even deeper conversations than what we'll be having over the next 4 days, so we do encourage you to register for that. I'd like to now introduce our first panel discussion. It's going to be setting the scene and the tone for what we'll be doing over the next few days. And importantly, I'm a numbers person, so we're definitely going to be focusing on what the past is telling us over the past few years, where we are right now, and what we can expect over the next year. Before I introduce my panelists, I'd like to welcome our expert who will be sharing with us a presentation. Scott Livermore, the Chief Economist at Oxford Economics. So you can join me on stage. He will be giving us a presentation, and then we'll be getting into the panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Scott.
Pleasure to be back at ATM this year, especially to hopefully deliver some good news. As Eleni said, what I'll do over the next few minutes is set the scene for the panel discussion, highlight some of the factors that are driving the recovery, and look at critically some of the crucial factors driving the forecast, and explain why we are cautiously optimistic despite the headwinds that we've already mentioned. Then we can discuss some of those issues in a lot more detail during the panel. As Eleni said, we are in the middle of recovery. Travel and tourism is recovering strongly. In the region, it's largely or initially been driven by domestic travel, which is back to 2019 levels in a number of countries around the region. And that represents a significant change to the market. In 2019, prior to the COVID crisis, around 55% of the market in the Middle East region was accounted for by domestic travel. During the peak, that rose to nearly 80%. While that's likely to come back down again as international travel normalizes again, we do think it's a permanent change. I was at Yaz at the weekend. My wife and I are planning our trips to Hatta, Fujairah, off to Iraq, things we'd never thought of doing 2 years ago before the crisis when it was all about international travel. International travel has lagged behind, especially the long-haul market, which is very important to the region. Around 2/3 of international visitors are classified as mid to long-haul travelers, compared to around 40% for the world as a whole. But we do expect strong growth this year as restrictions ease, normalization of travel regulations, strong vaccine rollout, all factors that will drive accelerated growth in 2022. The recovery in the region is likely to be boosted by significant international events. In Qatar, later the year, we've got the FIFA World Cup. The government in Qatar expects 1 million visitors in November and December, and this will help Qatar be one of the only country in the region to regain 2019 level of visitor numbers. Close behind that is the UAE, where the recovery has been kick-started by Expo 2020, as well as a good vaccine rollout and effective marketing campaigns. Although the start of Expo was hampered by the Omicron virus, by the end of March there were 23.9 million visitors, really hitting the target range of visitors for the event, and really demonstrating that significant international events are current and not a thing of the past. And both of these events, the World Cup, Expo, are really opportunities to showcase the respective countries and to build on top of for the longer term growth in the industry. If we look at some of the factors or the economic factors that are driving the outlook in travel and tourism, we are still optimistic about growth prospects this year, but the projections for GDP growth have been declining for a long time now. This is largely due to supply chain issues and the inflation it's causing. You can see both dynamics on the chart on the right-hand side, where the red line shows the deterioration in our GDP forecast, and the blue line, the ramp up in inflation. The problem with inflation is it reduces spending power. So the amount of money households have to spend on travel diminishes. It's also prompting a response from monetary authorities, most visibly in the United States, where the Federal Reserve could increase interest rates by 200 basis points during the course of 2022, and the central banks in the Middle East are likely to follow in lockstep, and even the ECB and the Bank of England are tightening monetary policy. The big concerns, or what keep people awake at night, has gradually moved from the COVID crisis to the Ukraine-Russia war. And although Eastern Europe and broader Europe are most directly exposed to the consequences, or the economic consequences, of the Russia-Ukraine crisis, there could be repercussions for the Middle East. The chart on the left-hand side shows the reliance on the region on the two crisis countries, Russia and the Ukraine. For the region as a whole, nearly 2.5% of visitors are drawn from Russia and Ukraine. And the exposure varies across countries. If you look at Dubai, Russia is in the top 2 origin markets for visitors. Ukraine's in the top 20. So it could be a significant dampener on an important source market. However, the impact is mixed. I think it's fair to say outbound travel from Russia is going to decline significantly. But for those countries that remain open to Russia and Russian visitors, they could receive quite a significant increase in share, which could be a positive for the tourism sector and the economy as a whole. The most obvious, the most direct transmission impact from the crisis to the region and travel and tourism is through oil prices. Although oil prices have come down from $140 per barrel in the immediate wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we expect oil prices to remain above $100 per barrel for most of this year. That clearly pushes up costs for airlines, and that will be translated into higher airfares and dampen demand, especially for those long-haul flights, which I mentioned earlier were important for the MENA region. But despite this, there are reasons to be positive. And I think the chart on the right-hand side really captures why we are still cautiously optimistic. There's a lot of pent-up demand. People want to travel again. Look how successful this event is. And certainly in the leisure market, countries and households in Europe, Asia, US, Canada have the means to travel again. During the crisis, people couldn't spend. But during the crisis, incomes were protected through various social security support. And during the 2 years of the crisis, households built up increased excess savings. So you can see from 5 to 10% of GDP extra saving, which will cushion households' impact from higher oil prices, and also generate the ability for them to spend on discretionary items such as travel. So in sum, before I hand back to Eleni to introduce the panel, the travel and tourism is recovering, particularly the domestic industry. International travel this year is expected to see strong growth, focused on the leisure sector. There are reasons to think the recovery in the region could be stronger this year than many other regions, given the significant international events, Expo and the World Cup. Russia-Ukraine crisis is clearly a headwind. It will push up oil prices, which is likely to dampen some demand, but there are good reasons to continue to be optimistic. Business travel is lagging behind leisure, but it will surely catch up, especially domestic travel leading international business travel, because virtual events have proved to be an imperfect substitute for face-to-face meetings. And I think people are really keen to see each other and meet in person. However, what the crisis has shown us is that online events have their place and they are likely to continue. So business travel may not rebound as quickly as leisure travel. And I think the final point to make to explain why business travel may lag behind leisure is, as is typical during a recovery from a recession, travel budgets are constrained. We've seen that before, we expect it to happen again. So while there will be a significant rebound in business events, it is likely to be the case that in-person attendees will be at a lower level than we'd become accustomed to in previous years. So with that, I'll hand back to Eleni to introduce the rest of the panel and take my seat ready for an interesting discussion.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was really illuminating, and I think basically a mixed bag. I keep thinking if we didn't have geopolitical issues, your prognosis would be even better, which would have been even more exciting. But ladies and gentlemen, I think it is a fantastic way to kickstart this conversation and importantly, this conference. I'd like to welcome the rest of our panelists today. Please welcome on stage Issam Kazim, the Chief Executive Officer of Dubai Corporation for Tourism and Commerce Marketing. Sir, welcome. A round of applause, please. Right next to me, Issam, so I can have you close to ask the tough questions. Welcome on stage Joachim Jan Sleifer, President, Middle East, Africa and Turkey at the Hilton. Bilal Kabani, Industry Head, Travel and Tourism at Google. Round of applause, please. And Andrew Brown, Regional Director, Europe, Middle East and Oceania at the World Travel and Tourism Council. Welcome, gentlemen. I have to say, you know, since the pandemic and since we've been able to meet again, I'm filled with excitement, and I hope that excitement doesn't wane, and I hope that we don't get another surprise on the COVID front. But we've got so much to get through. I have to say, the last time I saw you was just before we started with Expo. I think it was just as Expo kicked off, and I have to congratulate you because you literally achieved everything you said you would, and all your promises done.
I think the congratulations actually goes to Dubai as a city.
Yeah.
and the entire Expo team for a wonderful job that they have done to deliver on the promise and the commitment that they had made to the world.
Well, congratulations, and Expo was fantastic. Isam, so was there anything that really stuck out for you through Scott's presentation that is going to define what you'll be experiencing in Dubai?
I think, yes, definitely, because if you look at the way that our strategy was mapped out way back in 2013, we knew that there will always be geopolitical or socioeconomic factors that are outside of our control that will dictate when and where people travel. So for us, that having a diversified market approach was crucial. So we very quickly shifted from our 6, 7 traditionally strong markets. We want to make sure that we're maintaining our strength within those markets, of course, but we quickly started to map out 20 or 40 key markets for us. And today, we're active in more than 50 markets with direct connectivity to Dubai. And we're really leveraging that opportunity as much as possible, because leaving all your eggs in one basket will always cause problems in the future. So for us, having that approach, making sure that our comms are clearly open, making sure that we're working with the trade partners, that it's aligned with what we're communicating, and being able to accommodate and bring in and attract more and more tourists, business or leisure, to Dubai becomes fundamentally important.
Fantastic. Joachim, I'd like to ask you something that you and I had discussed before we got on stage, and you were saying you're really excited about the business traveler right now. When I look at Scott's presentation, he was saying that business travel right now is still lagging, comparatively speaking, to domestic and international travel. Anecdotally, do you think that business is catching up? And is that the signal that you're getting on the ground?
Yes, absolutely. I think, what we have seen, it is exactly the same as what Scott just said as well. The pandemic was really, we got out of the pandemic through the leisure travel. And this is what I have to say, great by Dubai Tourism and the other tourism partners we have around the region, really helping us to get out of the difficult situation. But as now the domestic or the leisure travel goes down a little bit, we see business travel picking up. So we have a lot of demand for individual travelers, but we also see demand for conferences. And this is the right indication that business is back up again. People want to meet again. Like Scott also said, right, these virtual meetings, it's all nice, but they want to connect with people again. And I think that's very human. I mean, that's really in the core of where we're here on this planet, is to connect. And this is what you see. People want to travel, they want to connect again. So the demand for conferences is actually big. The lead time is very short. So previously, where you have a conference for 500 people, you would book that a year out. Now we get those demands for in a month. So people are paying attention. They don't want to take risk by booking it too sort of long. So the demand is actually there, so which is really very good.
I mean, I have to say, I was one of those people that was sitting in their sitting room, hosting a lot of virtual sessions. I have to say, I much prefer seeing you in person. So it's good to be back. Bilal, could you give me a sense of the numbers you're seeing right now and what you're excited about, and anything that Scott said that is resonating with you specifically in terms of headwinds?
Yeah, absolutely. The interesting thing is that what Scott is seeing in economic figures, we see it in search behavior as well. So we do see a lot of growth in travel-related searches on Google. So there's a lot of appetite in the market for people to travel internationally again. As Scott said, there are lots of savings that have accumulated during the pandemic, and one of the main areas that people are excited to spend money on is travel and tourism. So that absolutely resonates. And in terms of headwinds, I mean, yes, the war in Russia is definitely a headwind. Potential variants in the future can be headwinds, but we also see a lot of resilience that is building up as well. Travelers in general are becoming, all the research is pointing to the fact that they are more comfortable traveling. PCRs and wearing masks is just becoming a slight inconvenience to a travel experience, and people are getting more and more used to that. So we see a lot of positive momentum building up, and we're very optimistic about the future.
Andrew, welcome. I know that you guys also focus a lot on the numbers in terms of, what travelers are doing right now. I guess we want to know, are we over and done with the risks of COVID and a potential lockdown? We've seen countries on red lists. It's been hard to travel. We see what's happening in China. It's creating a lot of concern. And then, of course, new risks on the geopolitical front with Federal Reserve being forced to change from an easing cycle into a tightening cycle. All of these things are so interconnected, and I guess there are risks that we didn't want to see specifically for this year.
No, not at all. But what we can say, we work very closely with Scott and his team at Oxford Economics, is around the numbers and the bounce back that we are receiving. I guess a few more headwinds to throw in there is taxation on the travel and tourism sector and where that is distributed, but also around the border closures and the reopening. But just going back to the 2020 numbers and where we were, travel and tourism halved in its value of travel and tourism contribution to global GDP. We lost 62 million jobs. So to give you a sense, in 2019, we were 9.6 trillion US dollars globally and 333 million jobs. Now, we weren't in a great state. Looking forward to last year, we released our numbers just recently, and they have bounced back very, very well, and it's looking very promising despite the headwinds that we have highlighted. So travel and tourism globally rebounded 21%, as well as 18 million jobs were relaunched into the economy. So we're looking very, very good, and I'll share later the numbers that we're seeing for the rest of this year as well.
All right, so Issam, here's my question, and it was something in Scott's presentation. He said that Russia is in the top 2 source markets, specifically for Dubai, and it's particularly about exposure when you look at the geopolitics that's playing out. Ukraine in the top 20. The UAE and generally a lot of GCC countries are remaining an open door policy, but that doesn't mean it's not, creating challenges, with sanctions and the geopolitical situation that's playing out. How are you navigating this right now? And you were talking about diversification, but I'm wondering how you're pricing in possible scenarios.
If you look at the statistics based on previous years, Russia has always been within the top 10 markets for us, for sure. Within top 6, I would say. And even now, when you look at the Q1 data for 2022, they are still within those numbers as well. So you can see that Oman is number 1 for us, India, KSA, UK, and then Russia. So they're still coming in strong. For us, Russia, Ukraine, CIS in general are a very important segment in terms of market. But with that diversified approach, we know that there isn't one market we're not overly reliant on any one market. So any switches that happen, we can immediately activate other markets. But
have you seen an impact thus far in the last few months?
In terms of numbers? No. In terms of numbers, we still remain open. We're still a very comfortable destinations for those markets. And we're seeing the numbers coming in as well. So we are confident that with the approach and the plans that we have with them and with the connectivity that we have with them, we can still leverage that and nurture that as well.
So Scott, it's interesting to hear that there's been no significant impact as yet, specifically for Dubai. You're talking about the macro issues, which of course are very worrying. The Middle East seems to be somehow cushioned from some of these issues. Do you think it's going to be one of those regions where it'll fare better than other markets globally?
I think there's a significant chance it will. I think we've seen here in Saudi, across the Middle East, the government being really supportive of growth, really driving a growth and diversification agenda. And ultimately that's going to feed through and benefit the private sector. But now there's a very much public sector focus and the governments are committed. And some of what we're seeing going on actually enables governments in the region to follow through more aggressively with their growth and diversification agenda. I talked about oil prices during my presentation, a headwind for long-haul travel, but it's clearly a benefit for the region. It tends to lead to higher growth, higher incomes. Not only will that benefit the economy more broadly, but it's also likely to stimulate domestic and intra-regional travel.
Andrew, there's nothing that keeps me up more than a much higher ticket fare because of higher oil prices. How are you pricing in that scenario? Oil prices are, we know that everything you touch will be impacted by a much higher Brent crude price.
Sure, well, just the World Travel and Tourism Council, we're not a transactional organisation. We're a member organisation. We represent the private sector globally. Our members are the presidents, chairs and CEOs. So on the stage here, we have 3 members in Google, Hilton and Dubai Tourism, and we're a close partner of Oxford Economics. So I'll perhaps divert that conversation to the folks like Hilton and the transactional organisations. But in terms of the forecast we're seeing, whilst last year we grew by 21%, for this year, globally, we're going to grow, we estimate, by 43%. So that is going to almost get back to 2019 numbers by 2023. It's
Is
going to
that
be
pricing in all the new challenges?
correct.
Is it pricing in higher oil price, inflation, all
That's
these
taken
new
into account
scenarios?
all of them in terms of the total GDP value of travel and tourism. Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, Joachim, then you can tackle this one. You know, you sound optimistic about the future, but to what extent are these macro issues going to influence your numbers for this year? Have you been doing some scenario planning, and where do you find the weak points?
Well, I might sound a bit too positive, but I don't think they will influence too much. I think what we are focusing on, if you look at the oil prices, we're focusing at we call it travel with purpose. And so we're really focusing on reducing our environmental impact by 50% in 2030 and doubling our social impact. And there's one thing that came out of this pandemic, actually, is that people reassessed, actually, what is important for them when they travel. And one of the things that came out on top is the whole ESG, right? Environmental, social, governance. And people are really paying attention on the sustainability part. A couple of things we have done during this difficult time, and we wanted to come stronger out of it, is to work with local produce. That's one of the things we have done. So we work, and for those of you that come by the stand, we have a great stand, our most sustainable yet. We show you, what we can grow in the UAE. We make all menus of food just produced locally. So we announced earlier this year we're procuring 350 tons of local produce. So we're cooking with local produce. But also I think one of the things we did is to, and again to Andrew's point, we're looking for a lot of people. And we should really be a reflection of the society in which we operate. And so while we are recruiting new team members as well, we're looking at recruiting them from everywhere. Meaning we're doing a special effort for people of determination. We want to be a real reflection of the society in which we operate. We do a lot of things on the whole travel with purpose, sustainability part, which is really going to help us drive the future.
So you're saying this started before the pandemic, but the pandemic was a catalyst to you mobilizing even more aggressively?
Yeah, I think people reassessed actually the way they travel. There was a research done by Accenture called Life Reimagined. And people, it said that 50% of the people that they surveyed actually really thought about travel differently than pre-pandemic. Because we have seen what happens to the world when it came to a complete standstill. And I think, one of the things Dubai did as well, and, is probably the better one to talk about it, is everything what Dubai has done on that front as well. They're building these solar panels in the desert. You might want to talk about it. Dubai can. There's a lot of things happening now, and people are really focused. I mean, our customers are asking for it. They're asking, I want to do business with you, but I want to know what you are doing.
Very quickly, are they willing to pay more for it?
Listen, I don't think it's about paying more for it. I think it's doing the right thing, actually.
Okay. Andrea, I want you to jump in here. Pardon me, Bilal, I want you to jump in here. Does that resonate in terms of the trends that you're seeing on sustainability?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we've done at Google is, so when you're searching for flights on Google, not only you can compare flights by price, but now you can compare them by carbon emissions. And we're doing these things because the market is asking for it. I think people in general are becoming much more conscious about their purchasing choices, and they are asking for more sustainable solutions, and they are putting the companies responsible to become much more environmentally friendly. So we do see that as definitely a very strong trend as well.
Issam, I mean, hearing what we heard from Joachim about these vertical farms in the desert, it absolutely is exciting. How is Dubai going to position itself in terms of, look, it's an exciting destination for tourists, but you obviously want to be adding a lot more to the offering?
Of course, I think from adding to the offering, it's something that Dubai has been able to do successfully for quite a few years. But now with sustainability and ESG and stuff, I think there's a different target audience and different segment that this means a lot to, and it is very important to us and to our agenda as well. So we've started off from the soft initiative side of things. A few years ago, we launched almost a sustainability awards from Dubai Tourism to recognize the efforts that the hotels are making, almost like retrofitting and adjusting and fixing and tweaking to be able to become more and more environmentally friendly. but slowly we started to push out a lot more initiatives that are a lot more active in terms of from a government level, not just from a hotel sector, but in terms of putting an agenda on a federal level that talks about 2050 and a plan about sustainability within that space of time, and making sure that every industry within that space is also working with that as top of mind. We also look at a simple thing that His Highness Sheikh Hamdan, the Crown Prince, had launched, which is the Dubai Can initiative, which is, again, reducing single-use plastics and educating the market about that and making it on a personal level. So a lot of corporates take up the responsibility and they sponsor filtered water fountains around the city from public and private sector to make it easier for people to bring their own refillable bottles and use that across the city as well. So we're doing it from the bottom-up approach, but also working on a top-down approach from a strategic perspective as well.
I've had the pleasure of traveling quite extensively since I moved to the region about a year ago, and I've been to Saudi, to Qatar, to Bahrain, Oman, and we've been speaking to so many people in the tourism sector, and everyone wants to be the big next thing in the region. So I'm thinking, I've been thinking about you, Isam, and I'm thinking, if everyone wants to be attracting the biggest conference, the biggest events, being the most exciting place, what does that mean then for growth in Dubai when, people are going to go, well, Bahrain is going to be building these very, exciting pieces of infrastructure that is going to be, questioning, where do I pick my destination to have my conference?
I think competition is always good, and it keeps everyone at the edge of their seat, making sure that they're pushing the boundaries rather than becoming complacent. So I always encourage competition. But then again, it's also about track record, history, and the legacy of being able to prove what you promise and delivering on what you've committed and promised, right? And I think I always use the example of the IMF in 2003. When Dubai won the bid, everyone questioned the decision, thinking, how can Dubai, a not so known destination back then, be able to pull off an event of that complexity when it comes to logistics and safety, security, and so on? And we did so, and did so very successfully. That really elevated Dubai's status, and we were able to then attract a lot of global events, which eventually led to the World Expo, which, if you look at it from a popularity perspective, it's maybe third to the World Cup and then the Olympics. But if you look at the fact that you run it for 6 months and you had 192 countries participating with the pavilions, and for us to be able to deliver that during a pandemic, I think it kind of shows you what Dubai can do.
I was in total awe where we saw numbers surging. Yes, absolutely, round of applause. And the expo still carried on. There were no interruptions, and Dubai became this, incredible example of how to manage during a pandemic. Andrew, I want to ask you who you think in the region is going to be the most exciting destination going forward. And as I say, having spoken to so many people across the region, they're all doing a lot of hard work to become really strong competitors.
Yeah, that's correct. And you're trying to call me out there. I like that. I'm not going to choose
Don't take
one.
sides. It's okay.
I'm not going to
Tell
take
us
sides.
regionally.
I'm a great New Zealander, so I'm not going to take sides on that. But just going back to demand and competition that Isam mentioned, we put out a trends report last year focused on where is the consumer going to look as they spend the pent-up demand that Scott referenced. And they're not really going to go to tier 1 cities anymore. They're going to be looking at social media. They're going to be asking friends and family for that validation of, hey, have you been there? Should I go? Can I sort of have a great time there? That's one. It's around demand evolution. Another few trends is sustainability. We've referenced that. And you earlier mentioned around, will they spend a little bit more in their next travels? We've found that, yes, they will. They want that wellness. They want that luxury. They want to sort of splurge to say, we've been in lockdown for a couple of years. How do we let our hair down? So we've found that. And one that perhaps Johan can speak to is a term I'm sure we've all heard called bleisure. So business and leisure. Folks are traveling now to do the conference for 3 days, bring their family over and enjoy the pool and all the great attractions that Dubai has to offer this week. But they're really merging the two together, which we didn't see before. But just also going back to domestic travel. Here in the UAE, I'm sure everyone that lives here saw the fantastic campaign during the pandemic around pivoting from international to domestic. Traditionally, it was around 38% was domestic spend total. That increased dramatically to over 60% because of that campaign. And that has continued. Obviously, borders were shut, but with the great border restrictions that were removed here in the UAE, I think that's a great one forward as well. So perhaps, yeah.
Do we know what travelers are really after? Do they want very open markets, very relaxed COVID restrictions, no mask wearing? I mean, are those still metrics that people are thinking about?
They want clear and consistent messaging. They don't want anything to prop up and be like, oof, wasn't expecting that. They want to know if they can come to a certain country that they're not going to get trapped in that country. They want to know they can get back home. So I live in the UK. I know I don't need to do a test on departure to get back there. If anything happened, I can go back. They want that messaging, and that all comes down to international collaboration, coordination, partnerships going forward, so that the messaging out there is consistent and it's timely, and it's sort of, we've got to rely on our source markets to get folks there. So that's where they're coming from. It's that clear and consistent messaging.
I think they want flexibility as well. What we see coming out very, very commonly is the flexibility, and that's why direct bookings have become much more common than indirect bookings. So travelers want to book directly with the airline or with the hotel, because that gives them the opportunity to change their booking or to cancel it without any fee, or to have that direct relationship. So flexibility and late cancellations is something that is very important as well.
I think just to add to that, you're absolutely right. The trends that we've seen come up lately as well. Two of the common ones are direct bookings. So group travel is starting to shift a little bit because it becomes much more comfortable, much more convenient for direct travel. And the other thing is the decision-making process, where JJ mentioned earlier as well. It's becoming shorter. Even the markets that usually would plan out well in advance are now becoming almost last minute. I mean, I use that term very loosely, but it's very different. So that pattern, and for us to be able to engage with them at the right time, has also required a shift as well.
That's fascinating. I mean, the last minute thing I can totally attest to. But again, when I hear, people don't want to get stuck. And that's the thing. You don't know what red list countries are going to pop up. You don't know what the issue is going to be. You don't know if there's going to be a new variant. Do you think that Dubai is going to be dealing with a situation like that very differently going forward? By the way, I was stuck in South Africa because Emirates cancelled their flights. Back then when Omicron came out. So I've been the recipient of policies changing like this.
See, the thing is, I think when you look at it from a destination perspective, I think Dubai managed it quite well, in the sense that when the first lockdown happened, we were one of the first places to shut down in March, coming after a very successful 2019, right? We had record numbers. We shut down after January, February also being record for us, and 4.2% growth year on year. But March to May, we went into lockdown, worked very closely with all our partners from private and public sector, rolled out new policies and procedures in place, made sure that it's communicated very clearly, rolled out a campaign locally telling people you're responsible. So that really got the mindset going that we need to look after one another. By May, we opened up for domestic tourism, where we piloted the strictest measures, giving us a chance to loosen up a little bit to find that perfect balance during the time where the World Travel and Tourism Council awarded Dubai a safe destination travel. We launched our own program called Dubai Assured. By July, we opened up for international travel. And again, to Andrew's point, we never looked back. We never shut down again. And why was that important? Is because during the time that other markets were shutting down, people found themselves stuck in Dubai because they cannot go back. The borders are closed. So what we did was we extended their visa so they feel comfortable. But then we also rolled out new visa programs. We made remote working visa because we found out people working from here feeling comfortable here. We did the freelance visas, golden visas, retirement visas, and that's the thing that Dubai does. We think in a very entrepreneurial spirit. So making those changes on the fly becomes extremely important for us.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we saw. I'm going to get a comment from each of you, and then I'm going to open the floor for questions. If you have any questions, please jot them down. We'll be coming to you shortly. Let's start with you, Andrew.
Yeah, sure. So just going back to Izan there, Dubai was one of 300 destinations around the world that adopted the WTDC Safe Travel Stamp. Now, this was global protocols on 12 different industries that were free. People can pick them up and adopt them to the organization, and that was the sort of the bedrock of which we were trying to help stimulate consumer confidence, which all revolves around health and hygiene principles. So whilst folks don't want to get stuck, they also don't want to catch anything whilst they're there. So the protocols that Dubai put in place and those 300 destinations was pinnacle to the success of reopening and safe travelers.
Fantastic. Scott.
Is it my turn?
Scott first. He hasn't spoken in a while. I've been seeing you listen intently, so I know that you've, as an economist, I'm sure you're listening very closely at the trends, potential trends.
Yeah, so I think the thing I want to come back to is competition. it was mentioned competition is good. If you look at Europe, there's a lot of countries with very successful travel and tourism markets, all with their own unique features, their own comparative advantage. So I think while some countries in the region may grow faster than others, that will be from a lower base. And as a whole, a rising tide floats all ships, and ultimately benefit the region as a whole. And I think if you look at one of the trends going forward, and it comes back to the point I was making about how the region's very dependent on mid to long haul travel. And as we move into a sustainability agenda, that is the area of travel that's going to hit hardest. So one of the focuses of the region is to get people to come here, maybe less frequently, but for longer. And a successful regional market will help with that.
Joachim.
I think one of the main trends, and we alluded to it earlier, people want to travel again, and they want to travel in groups as well. Meaning one of the things we've seen that also families are traveling in groups, so not only mom and dad and the kids, but they take the grandparents with them and some other kids with them. So one of the things we've done at Hilton, we created something which is confirmed connecting rooms. There's no other hotel company where you can do that actually. If you go on our website and you book direct with us, exactly to the point that was made, you can actually book connected rooms with us. So, you know, you want to travel as a family, we connect all your rooms, and you're going to have fun staying with us.
Fantastic. Bilal.
I want to build on what Aysam was saying. I think Dubai really set an example of how a city can be agile in the face of unpredictability when it comes to COVID. And I think that's such a big lesson, not just for tourism boards and cities, but for travel and tourism companies across the industry. Travel and tourism is becoming unpredictable, and the demand has been shifting very dramatically in very unpredictable ways across the world, looking at different markets, implementing different measures, lockdowns, etc. So this unpredictability of demand is forcing travel and tourism companies to be very data-driven and very agile and very responsive. And that's been, you know, the majority of our focus with our travel and tourism partners in the past couple of years, is how to help them leverage data to become more responsive.
Do you think that unpredictability still very much is a reality in the market, Bilal, right now, as we see it?
I think so, and I think that just opened the eyes of travel and tourism companies of how they can leverage data to be much more efficient and much more targeted and much more responsive, not just in the way they advertise and the way they market, but even operational efficiencies. I mean, today we work with some of the biggest airlines to help them bid differently on each search keyword based on how much they expect that search to result in actually a booking. So being that responsive in real time is such a big lesson for travel and tourism companies. And I think that's a big opportunity, and that will define who will win and who will lose in the next phase.
I promise I won't share the secret. Could you tell us what day it is best to book a ticket online on Google, please? Your secret is safe with us.
Well, I think that's...
Is it Tuesday?
I think it's right there on the interface. You can actually see what's the expected price and how is it going to change.
I heard it's a Tuesday morning or something like that. Anyway, okay, questions from the audience.
There was a report out this morning from the S&P Purchase Managers Index, and it was saying that oil and raw materials were at a 3.5-year high in Dubai. So how are you factoring that into for hotels and rising costs?
Thank you, brilliant, thank you. Who would like to? So oil, they came out with a Purchasing Managers Index a piece of data, and basically commodity prices are on the rise. So how are hotels dealing with that new reality specifically in Dubai? So well, cost in prices and raw materials.
Yeah, I think you know, it's not only a issue here, Dubai. I think it's just a more general issue. I think, you know, there's two elements to it. One is that it puts pressure on profits, clearly. But the second thing is what I said earlier. You know, we have to work harder in operating our hotels in a more efficient way. And I think this is where really the most of the attention goes to nowadays. And again, working with local partners. See how we can operate our hotels in a better way. I don't think it particularly puts pressure on prices. Actually, I don't believe that we will increase prices because the oil price is actually going up. I think it's eroding profits maybe. But you know, currently, I think what we're doing with the volume that we have, we actually see very little impact. for now at least.
I guess, have your margins recovered to pre-COVID levels?
Yes.
Yes. Is that a smile? Okay, any more questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
And somebody mentioned earlier about how the industry is trying to rebound from the loss of jobs within the travel industry during the pandemic. So if Google is coming into that space by providing direct booking to individuals, don't you think you'll be taking away the jobs of so many travel agencies, most especially those that specializes in ticketing? How do you intend to protect their job within the industry?
So Google does not actually, you cannot actually book on Google. Google is a platform where, billions of users come and search for hotels and flights. And instead of giving them, the typical 10 blue links that we used to give them decades ago, they can actually, click on the price that Booking.com is providing, or Wigo, or any other travel agency, and they can go and book and complete their booking on that travel agency. So we're not actually an online travel agent, or we're not replacing the online travel agencies. We work with all of them. They're all our partners. We're just a platform where users come to find prices, and then they go and continue their booking on the travel agency's website.
Thank you so much. Any more questions?
Hi, I'm a healthcare scientist, so I'm speaking from a consumer's point of view. Since now sustainability is ESG is a big thing. In terms of, I'm a frequent flyer and a tourist. So my concern in terms of booking since every sector is concerned about maintaining sustainability, would that affect me in terms of spending? Like you mentioned earlier, that tickets are on the rise because of the current oil situation. So it's a general question. Would maintaining sustainability affect me as a consumer?
Yeah, and that's
Thank
the
you.
question that I said, are people willing to pay more for a more sustainable product? And that's quite important.
Yeah, let me take that one. What we work with a partner called South Pole, and they have a meetings impact calculator. And so what we offer to our customers now is, if you do a meeting with us, we use South Pole as a partner, and they can offset the carbon footprint. So you fill in all the destinations where people are flying from, the time they spend within the country, and they can offset it actually. So there is a cost, but there is a lot of empathy is maybe not the right word, but companies want to do well. And that's what I said earlier. It's about doing the right thing. And people do actually do nowadays. So we offset them.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Can I just pick up on that
Yes.
in terms of, from a WTDC perspective, we represent the private sector. Last year at COP in Glasgow, we launched what we call the Net Zero Roadmap. And now this identifies for 5 different industries the step-by-step guide to get to carbon net zero by 2050. So that's available online. That's on our website. So if you want to go there, that is for SMEs, which are over 80% of our sector. That's the first step you can take. And last month at our Global Summit in Manila, we launched what we've called the Hotel Sustainability Basics. So this is a 12-step guide for hotels, large, small, medium, whatever you want, to really take those steps forward to drive it, so that as an industry, we can tell the consumer that we're not just saying that we're doing great stuff, that we're doing great stuff, because it's a collective effort at sustainability. If one falls, we all lose.
Absolutely. Isam, did you want to weigh in here?
I think there are a lot of trends and a lot of changes that happen around the world. So in the beginning, it might seem or come across that it's impacting in terms of cost. And the easiest thing is to bake in that cost within the prices. But I think the market is mature enough, and they understand, our partners that we play with, that they understand that that's a short-term gain, but it could actually have a long-term impact. So we work very closely with them. They know exactly how these things are a strategic opportunity. So we shouldn't be thinking about it from a short-term perspective. But I think, look, in the long term, the way that patterns are changing, you can see the new generation of travelers that are coming in. They're a lot more attuned to the environment and the overall sentiment that surrounds that, rather than just the leisure aspect of travel itself. There's a lot more of the personal enrichment, stuff like that they're into. So it's very important for us to really give it a serious consideration and work on it from that perspective, rather than just ticking a box.
Thank you, panel. My name is Damien Conway. I'm a 30-year restaurateur here and in Europe. It is not a question. It was just to restate again a popular statement that Dubai, in particular Mr. Isam, has dealt with the pandemic, and Expo has gone ahead extremely well. And I just wanted to restate that. I think it probably wasn't given enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to start wrapping the conversation up, and you know, hearing that you're a restaurateur, it kind of cast my mind back that the amount of pain that industry has endured in the hospitality sector must not be underestimated. The amount of money that has been lost, the jobs that have been lost, and specifically restaurants that have shut down. So we're hoping to see a significant bounce back in this specific sector, and it's encouraging to see, right? I'm going to talk about the winners and the losers as we wrap up the conversation, and who you think those might be in the next few years. Take into consideration the new geopolitical uncertainties that have now emerged. Isam, do you want to start?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. I can. Are you sure? I can.
Yeah. No, I'm good.
I can start at the end.
I think, look, I mean, I think from a winner's perspective, it will definitely be those who are nimble, right? And I think, and I keep reiterating this because that entrepreneurial spirit is truly important. We live in a very dynamic, first of all, we work in a very dynamic industry, and I think the world has evolved and is changing is so rapid right now with technology and the disruption that that's causing within the market. So I think those who are losing out or missing out are the ones who shun certain things, thinking it's a trend and it's going to go away. I think staying attuned with the changes, making sure that you are literally riding the wave with everything that's happening, surround yourself with the people in the know, and also don't discount the young generation that's coming through, because these are the ones who are going to be driving a lot of the decisions going forward. And I think that becomes fundamentally important for us. And I think from a again, looking at a winner's perspective, what has been the true backbone of Dubai's success has been the public-private sector partnership. Not dictating what's going to happen and just expecting everyone to follow, but listening to the private sector, understanding the issues that they're facing or what they're going through, and trying to adapt the systems and the policies and the procedures to ensure that it at least for the majority, it is the best working solution.
Thank you so very much. Scott?
Oh, it's difficult to add to that. I think the winners will be those that realise travel and tourism has changed. It's going to continue to change. And what's critical is, I think if we're honest, we don't know for certain how it's going to continue to change. So how important will be sustainability? Will that be flying less, or is it looking locally and making sure that the benefits of travel and tourism really benefit local economies, and you're having an authentic experience rather than a showcase experience? So really understanding and capturing what the consumer wants and what the consumer preferences are, to stay ahead of that evolution. Really is being nimble and continue to be nimble and agile. And there'll be these sectors that realise they have to change.
Joachim?
Yes. I think travel and tourism is going to be a winner. Overall, a latest report from WTTC, they say we're going to recruit 126 million people. And so as long as we are realizing that we take care of the destinations in which we operate in every possible way, so bring your own bottle next time and fill it, come and fill it at our stands actually. We have water created out of air. But you know, we should really take care of the planet, and I think then travel and tourism is going to be a winner.
Fantastic. Bilal?
Yeah, very much in line, I think, with what's been said, but I think the winners are going to be the ones who are obsessed about the end user and who invest in technology and data infrastructure and human capital that allows them to capitalize on, you know, listening to the end user, understanding their needs, and adapting in a very agile way to fluctuations and differentiations in demand, and personalizing.
Andrew?
Yeah, I agree. And going back to what Ism said, it's around partnerships and collaboration. We're all in this together, and so how can we each share best practices to go forward? I think the folks that can nail that on the head will win. One aspect that hasn't been mentioned on this panel is staff shortages. So I think those destinations, those organizations that can attract new staff, Joachim, you stole my line there, with 126 million jobs over the next 10 years. It's how can that go? Because right now, there's staff shortages everywhere, especially in travel and tourism. And just to add on to your stat there, Joachim, over the next 10 years, 1 in every 3 new jobs created is in travel and tourism. So how are we going to skill those folks up? Where are they going to go? The opportunities are there. It's who can capture it. They're going to be the winners.
That's very exciting. Isam, I'm going to start a ritual between you and me. Every time we're on stage together, you say certain things and then they happen. So, your prediction, your prognosis, what can we expect from Dubai, or even just putting it out there, what are you expecting in the sector that's exciting you?
I think there's been a quick transition that has happened over the past 18 to 24 months. Not only do we want to become the most visited city, with people spending a long time when they come here for a break, but Dubai has started to rise up on the ranking of the best city to live in. And you will start seeing more and more people from around the world relocating to Dubai, setting up shop in Dubai, bringing their families to set a home in Dubai. And that's going to become the trend that's going to then lead into the visiting friends and relatives aspect of tourism as well.
I know you and your team have a really quick turnaround time in making things happen. So when we're on stage again, I'll be asking you if these issues have happened. Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for my fabulous guests.
Thank you for hosting us.
Thank you.